Hey y'all, so I'm super excited, super excited to be sitting here with Dr. Sharbreon Plummer. She is amazing. She's an artist, she's an intellect, just all around great girl, okay? So glad to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here, Kobe. I'm so excited to talk to you and to share all about my passions with fiber and textiles and a little bit about my practice.
So stay tuned, it's gonna be dope. How did you get started in textiles with fabrics? And what does it mean to be a fabric artist?
Those are all great questions. So, funny enough, textiles, fabric, all that stuff has always been something that I have loved. I've always adored. You know how you just find yourself drawn to things? And I don't know if it's just I'm a textural person, like even with what we have on, the patterns, the richness. I love seeing unique color combinations, that sort of thing. So it's kind of always just been a point of interest. But funny enough, as I got older, and I would talk to my grandmother, two things came up. My great-great-grandmother used to quilt. And then her daughter, my great-grandmother, that I had the pleasure of having in my life for over 20 years, she would sew, and she always had the most fabulous clothes. And when she passed away, I inherited all those things. And so it shifted from really me being this person that was sort of enamored with textiles to now wanting to do a deeper inquiry because I had these artifacts that were attached to a person that was no longer with me. But to be a fabric artist, you know, some people are like, well, do you quilt, do you do this, do you do that? And my entry point was quilting, but at this point, I'm open to everything. I think at the root of it, as a woman, especially as a Black woman, fiber and textiles and fabric are things that we have utilized in so many different ways and we've imbued so much meaning on, and not just for us, but women of all backgrounds across various cultures. As you start to like understand these different cultural representations, using Central America as an example, you think about Peruvian garments, Guatemalan garments, all these different things, they all have their own sort of special meaning, and that sort of memory making is most of the time heralded by women.
Memory making and women, that is a great segue into the next part. And I want to talk about women and Black women specifically and the history of quilting. Both of our designs kind of have this patchwork kind of situation going on. Can you touch on quilting and women and Black history and how rich and important it is that we recognize that?
Yes, and please feel free to cut me off because you know I talk about this all day. I love it, but you know, as someone who is born and raised in the South, we understand the legacy and history of enslavement and sort of all of the different cultural artifacts and memory that we brought with us. And so often when we think about enslavement, we think about the Middle Passage, it's something that's super traumatic, but it's also something that I find to be fascinating and beautiful because out of that pain, we had all of these cultural fusions and things that we were able to bring into this country. Historically, you'll find people used to write about women who were enslaved as these sort of second hands to mistresses on the plantation, when in fact they were creating their own work. They were the authors and originators of their own designs and techniques. So when you see these patchwork designs like we have on, you can think about how it's sort of in many ways like this homage to a group of women who took what they had as a people. We know that very well, right? We take the remnants that people, you know, try to give to us and we make something beautiful and something fantastic out of it. And so even from that time to present day, quilts have continued to be what I call this archive, this space where you can learn about a family's history, learn about a woman's history through the work of the hand. So Black women have been utilizing quilting for a very long time as a way to not only create cultural memory, to clothe and shield and keep their families warm and protected, but quilts were even utilized in areas such as Alabama and Mississippi as part of the civil rights movement. Quilts and other fabric-based goods were sold and used to raise money to support freedom fighters, and quilting bees were a space where Black women could get together, they could talk about just things they were going through, enjoy one another's company. So it's a space of both proactivity where Black women could get together, organize, and talk about things that were happening in their community, but then also it was this place of joy and leisure. And that's something that I personally enjoy exploring the most, because we don't talk about Black women's joy enough, in my opinion.
So if people want to get into quilting today, like how can people get started?
Oh my gosh, so many ways. So one thing I love, I should backtrack, that I love about quilting is that it is a very intergenerational process. So if you have a loved one, a grandmother, an aunt, your mom, your sister, whoever, that can teach you how to quilt, that's to me one of the best ways to learn, because you're creating this memory with this person. And that's something that's very beautiful, that you can ascribe to this new artifact that y'all make together. But YouTube University, child. Anything you want to know, it is true. On YouTube. Yes. There are across various cities. If you look up quilting bees, quilting circles, you also have your big box stores like Joann and things like that that might host classes, or even a local sewing shop. I highly recommend you support your local businesses. So there are a couple things I'm really excited about as it pertains to my own journey in writing about and working with quilters across the country. One being Quilt Folk is a publication that I write for. I've had the pleasure now of working with them on 2 issues and working on a 3rd. And in those, I'm able to highlight and spotlight just everyday women, amazing people who are working at the intersection of personal practice, some people social justice, different things like that. So those are a few different things you can look into through Quilt Folk. Also, I'm working with a group called Common Threads Press, it's based in the UK, and we're working on a publication called Diasporic Threads that highlights Black women, fiber, and textiles. And I've had the pleasure of being able to condense my dissertation down a little bit, because I know y'all don't want to read 400 pages, into a little bit of text that kind of talks about the context and history that I was talking about with Colby. And we were also able to interview 7 different women across the U.S. who all work at the intersection of textiles and sort of lived experience as Black women. And then at the end, we actually aggregated this sort of repository of Black women working in fiber and textiles across the country. And actually the world. We have a few different countries. But it's over 100 Black women who submitted as part of this directory. And once it's published and out there, you'll be able to scan a QR code and learn about all of these different artists across the world.
What is the difference between a quilt and a blanket?
Well, a quilt can be a blanket, but a blanket can't be a quilt. Okay? But in all seriousness, when I think of a blanket can be sort of just one large, piece of cloth that might have a border around it. It's something that we wrap up in. It's something, when I hear the word blanket, I think of something more commercially produced. And when I think of a quilt, I think of care, I think of love and compassion. I think about work of the hand, and I think about an artistic eye, a creative eye. So many quilters now either work from a pattern, they create their own designs in their mind. There's an added level of intention and, to me, thoughtfulness that goes into creating a quilt, in addition to all the little technical pieces I won't bore y'all with. But yeah, I think that a quilt possesses deeper meaning and significance, whereas a blanket can be a bit more detached. It doesn't have that same depth of meaning.
So I had the awesome opportunity to sit down with Sharbreon, who is, of course, a textile artist, but I also got the opportunity to sit down with a real-life quilter. So it's like those 2 worlds came together in real time, and y'all, the convo was amazing. Tune in.
Oh, those colors.
This is God's greatest creations, and this is all hand work. So all these little pieces are put on by hand.
Yes.
So this machine is called a mid-arm machine, and basically it's a quilting machine, and all it does is quilt. But the reason it's called a mid-arm is because a long arm is maybe 6 feet.
A classic has to be